Good evening and welcome. I'm Julián Zugazagoitia, the Director and CEO of the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art, and it is my joy to welcome all of you tonight for what is going to be an extraordinary presentation. It is our first Mary Atkins lecture series and the Kivett and Seligson lecture combined, and it is this that makes possible that we have such a distinguished lecturer as Elizabeth Diller, the founding principal of Diller, Scofidio, and Renfro. And it is fitting, definitely, that we have and host her here at the Nelson Atkins because great architecture and great art go hand in hand. And I personally have found incredible inspiration in many of her works, but I think, and I was relating to her earlier, that perhaps one of the most vivid moments is when I discovered her work was many years ago in the 2002 Swiss National Exhibition, in which Elizabeth created something that is the most poetical moment, that was a blur, a cloud floating in the middle of a lake, and then you would go into these passerelles, and it was just really dematerialized architecture, but it was a wonderful moment, especially because it was, on a personal note, the first time that my wife and I had escaped from our baby boy, who was only a year and a half old, and her mother-in-law had the pleasure of taking him. So the first time, so your architecture and incredible moments go hand in hand, but the greatest also joy was to not only discover her and make her acquaintance, but seeing from Boston, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Boston, and also closer to when I was living in New York, Lincoln Center. It was in my own neighborhood, and the transformation that accomplished transformed not only Lincoln Center, but New York. And New York has been, again, transformed by the High Line and many other things. The only thing that compensates living in New York after starting enjoying a new hall was having here, of course, the Kaufman Performing Arts Center, which pairs, and I know that you visited recently. But again, the works that she has done has been an inspiration, but also a transformation in many ways, and she will be, I'm sure, sharing with us many, many things that will dazzle us. I was saying that tonight it's part of our Mary Atkins lecture series, and this is possible thanks to the trustees of the Atkins trustees, Mary Lou Browse and Grant Burcham, and we're very grateful for making this possible. And I'd like to thank as well our own trustees, the Nelson Atkins trustees, our own board chair, Shirley Hellsberg, Peter Gattermeyer, and Charlie Sosland, who have worked to make this collaboration possible. And also our dedicated staff that work very hard to make the magic of these evenings, Tony Woods, Michael Buckhold, Adam Johnson, and Catherine Footer. But it is also a special tonight because we're inaugurating this relationship between the Atkins lecture series and the Kivett and Seligson lectures of the UMKC Department of Architecture, Urban Planning and Design. And I'd like to thank personally Ted Seligson for his partnership and leadership to bring this along, and also for his kindness in bringing to the memory of someone who was also a very influential architect in our community, Clarence Kivett, whose lectures also graced this hall. So it is a great both novelty and tradition that we're celebrating tonight. So Ted, thank you for being such a great partner and such an inspiring person. And it is my pleasure to welcome on the stage Joy Swallow, who will be introducing our great speaker tonight. Joy is a chair and associate professor of the Department of Architecture, Urban Planning and Design at our great neighbor, the University of Missouri, Kansas City. Please welcome Joy to the podium. Thank you.
Good evening. Well, I must say that there are many who need to be thanked this evening for this event. And the first among those who needs to be recognized is Mr. Ted Seligson, or as we've referred to him as simply Ted. I've had the pleasure of working with Ted for 25 years at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and the Department of Architecture, Urban Planning and Design. The Kivett Seligson lecture this evening is because of his dogged determination to bring the very best to Kansas City. Your generosity of spirit and willingness to share is a celebration unto itself. So who is Ted, for those who don't know him? I give you a quote from a longtime friend and a former client, Bill Shapiro, the creator and host of the Cypress Avenue and KCUR. And he had this to say: "As mediocrity too often becomes the currency of the day, it is more vital than ever to have among us those who consistently strive to raise the bar." Ted has been a bar raiser throughout his entire career. And Ted, we will forever be grateful for your gift to our community. Your gift is especially meaningful to the students, both past and present, at UMKC. Now, Hannon Kivett, you played a pivotal role in making sure that the Kivett Lecture Series was alive and well. I know Ted is honored to be in the company of Clarence Kivett's legacy in the naming of this lecture series, the Kivett-Seligson Lecture Series. Clarence Kivett was a friend, a mentor, and a colleague to Ted in his formative years as a practicing architect. So only fitting that these two legacies come together this evening. And to the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art and the Mary Atkins trustees, we thank you for being an important partner this evening as well. I know Ted and Hannon are delighted that we've been able to partner with this important institution. So this evening, it is my pleasure to introduce Ms. Elizabeth Diller. Ms. Diller is the founding partner and principal of Diller, Scofidio, and Renfro, an 85, I think, plus person interdisciplinary design studio. Ms. Diller attended the Cooper Union School of Architecture and is a professor at Princeton University. A sampling of notable projects: Lincoln Center of Performing Arts, renovation and expansion of the Juilliard School, expansion of the School of American Ballet in New York, the High Line, Phase 1, 2, and 3, a 1.5 mile long urban park situated on an obsolete, elevated railway. A list of current projects is literally too long for me to go into any detail, so I'm going to mention two, and literally they span the nation and are international. Museum of Modern Art expansion, the Museum of Image and Sound in Rio de Janeiro. The list is very long and very continuous. Ms. Diller was awarded the Genius Award from the MacArthur Foundation for their commitment to integrating architecture with issues of contemporary culture, recognized as one of the most innovative design practices in the profession and among 50 most innovative companies in the world. Their work doesn't espouse a design signature or a brand identity. Instead, it brings each project a mindfulness of our contemporary and ordinary condition. Their razor-sharp observations have focused on a wide range of the everyday: domestic space, visiting a museum, traveling on an airplane, or just observing people in the windows of urban buildings. Using multiple platforms for exploration and expression of space and condition, they have created buildings, art installations, performances, choreographed dances, photographs, theater sets, and video. And they state the modes of expression or medium is a matter of using the right tool for the particular job. Thus, the incredible mix of theoretical installations and experimentation that in turn informs their architecture. Their method of collaboration has been described as Socratic, teaching by asking instead of telling. I think that approach is what sets the firm on a trajectory where they are free, and in their words, to interrogate the spatial conventions of the everyday. In a profession that typically has held the romantic idea of the individual architect, or as I like to say, the Ayn Rand syndrome, Diller, Scofidio, and Renfro instead recognize that there's contribution of many minds, many hands, and there's a huge commitment to their listening to their clients. And I quote, a quote is, "Clients praise the responsiveness of the studio, its genuine concern with designing imaginative solutions to their needs, inventing a practice that understands working for others as a mode of engaging their own intellectual and cultural curiosity. May well be the most significant design achievement of DS&R, a unity of commitment rather than style that permeates its activities." Paul Goldberger, the leading figure in architecture criticism and a Pulitzer Prize winner for distinguished criticism, writes this: their work is extraordinary and important. It questions architecture, but also celebrates the potential. Wit, rigor, elegance describes Diller, Scofidio, and Renfro. We are honored that Liz Diller accepted our invitation to Kansas City, and now it is my honor to introduce Elizabeth Diller.
Wow, thank you, Joy, for that beautiful introduction. Just those list of activities make me tired just to hear all that. Really, we're doing all that stuff. Well, I want to thank Joy. I want to thank Julian, the Nelson Atkins, Ted Seligson, Hannon Kivett, Mary Atkins trustees. This is a really important lecture, and you know, it does take a lot to get me out of New York and try to share the work publicly. And for this occasion, I really wanted to kind of reflect a little bit backwards and forwards with the work. And every once in a while, when one does a special lecture, you try to put it into some kind of context and maybe make sense out of you know, a whole string of projects that aren't necessarily so clearly related. But then when you kind of peel back and think a little bit and you start to see patterns in your work, and in this assemblage of stuff, I actually started to see some patterns that I hadn't seen before. So the work that you're going to see involves a whole kind of a range from independently generated projects to commissioned works, to works in a whole variety of media, installations, upping the scale to buildings in the city. But despite the many trajectories of the work, it's consistently focused on certain concerns. We are very, very interested in publicness. We're interested in rethinking the institution. We're interested in questioning the conventions of everyday operational space. And we're also interested in the role of technologies in architecture, or this condition of bricks and pixels that we'd like to put together into some other entity. And we're also interested in visuality, and there are many other themes that intersect the work at different times. And as Joyce has said, it's kind of like it's like finding the right tool for the right project. We're started off doing independent projects without clients, usually on borrowed or stolen sites, and kind of guerrilla architecture. And then we were invited into the institution slowly, and then we were critical of it, and then we became part of the institution in some way. And this kind of this array of work kind of spans that a bit. And so I wanted to focus on these projects that are post 9/11, and there was something that I think changed everyone at that time, and for us before 9/11, we were doing a whole range of independent projects, theater works, installations, outside, inside, and you know, while we still maintain that practice, we still continue to do independently generated projects. For the first time, audience became important to us when we did this. And this is the viewing platform at 9/11. And it kind of defined this turning point, and not only because the event itself is so seared in our memory, but that's the first time when we realized that the architect actually can have agency outside of the typical commissioned client relationship. And this realization, peppered with many, many other things and projects and different ways of doing the work, has come full cycle to the very last project I wanted to show, which in many ways has as a kind of mirror of this first one that I'll show. And this was a couple of weeks after 9/11. The public was restrained from entering the precinct of 9/11 because there were barricades many blocks away. And first there was a recovery effort, and then there was a cleanup effort. And in order to let the vehicles kind of roam, do what they had to do unobstructed, they kept the crowds back. And at the same time, the general public had this compulsive desire to get close to ground zero. And it was it wasn't really perverse, it was something other. And it's hard to explain. It was a real need, we had it too. And you smelled the destruction. You could see it on the news. The skyline looked different all of a sudden. It was very strange. But you actually wanted to bear witness. You wanted to get close. And it was a little bit of a phantom limb kind of condition where you felt it, but you didn't see it. And somehow you wanted to kind of test that weird reality, new reality. And so while the city was disorganized and with no bureaucracy actually to get in the way, we teamed up with David Rockwell and created this non-for-profit and raised some money and hired a contractor, and we built, with a slightly legitimate, we got some acceptance from the city, but we would have not normally been able to do that. But we designed and constructed this 300-foot long ramp that was a viewing platform 13 feet up in the air. And it started on Fulton and Broadway. And it was just made of plain plywood and scaffolding, and it was fairly cheap. And this is basically what you came to at the end of the platform. The project came out of a sense of professional and civic responsibility. And it was a kind of call to action, very much like what professionals felt like in many different fields that just brought their expertise to the site to help in whatever way they could. And this was our way of helping. It was keeping the traffic and the public out of each other's way. And this also intersected another interest that we had about spectatorship and vision, and we created this place, this platform where there was actually nothing to see, but some rubble at that time, and it was a highly charged invisibility, and this invisibility is kind of appears in our projects. This notion of looking at nothing appears in different moments in all of our work. And so at the same time, almost at the same time as that project, is the Blur building that Julian referred to. And it was totally different cultural context, but it was an opportunity to do an installation at an environmental scale. And we had never gotten that opportunity before. This was for the Swiss Expo 2002, and it was sited on Lake Neuchâtel. And the Blur building was to be an exposition pavilion for the Swiss Expo. And we again wanted to riff on issues of vision and visuality and spectatorship. And we were also at this point really opening up to a different kind of audience. Prior to this, we had a kind of an art and architecture following and an academic following. And slowly we began to realize that good work was able to be read in many different ways by different populations, and that it was really maybe the hardest work to figure out how to speak to lots of people at the same time. And this project was really that. It was basically a building that was just structure and plumbing. It had no walls, it had no space, really. It's a tensegrity structure with a system of high-pressure fog nozzles, 35,000 of them. And water is just simply pumped from the lake, and it's filtered, and it's atomized into basically a cloud. And there's also a smart weather system that reads the shifting climatic conditions and responds in real time. So this is about the size of a football field. Here is the structure, and with the platform and the upper platform, which is the angel deck, with two long bridges, one bringing you there, one bringing you back. So we built this thing on 4 columns, and it was super, super lightweight. And this was kind of the building module, was this fog nozzle. And this is the computer interface. So this was really one of the first kind of smart projects that we did. So there was a weather station that was reading the actual temperature, wind speed, humidity level, dew point, all of that, and was then thinking in real time about how and where to put higher pressure, depending on the wind and depending on all these other environmental factors. And as we taught it how to respond to the weather, it acquired an artificial intelligence. Blur was a response, basically, to a culture that is seduced by the simulation of the real. And I mean, we are a very tech-savvy studio, but at the same time, we're not acritical. We really look at the function of technology, and we looked at, in this case, there were expos all over the world and World's Fairs that had super high-res, large simulations of the real, and that was a kind of a point of pride, I think, technically. And it's a culture that measures success in pixels per inch, and progressively higher and higher fidelity is something that is aspired for. And we decided to make something that was decidedly low definition. And okay, so this is the access to Blur, and this is what it felt like inside. So this was an exposition pavilion in which there was nothing to see, actually, and nothing to do inside. The world was put out of focus while our visual dependence was put into focus. And we were really interested in that moment where you kind of, you can no longer count on your eyes. You had to start feeling and smelling and looking, and you know, just being in a different world. Blur is a building, kind of, that aspired to be pure atmosphere, and it often merged with the weather, where it was kind of indistinguishable from the weather. Entering Blur was like stepping into a medium that was formless and featureless and depthless and scaleless and massless, surfaceless and dimensionless. In it, visual and acoustic references were erased, leaving only an optical whiteout and the white noise of the pulsing fog nozzles. So climbing, let's see if okay, so this is accelerated on the left, and kind of the sense that you have over on the right, and you occasionally can see a figure that's just emerging and then disappears again. And you might ask, why? How did the Swiss allow you to build this? Like, why? I keep asking myself that. It was kind of an amazing moment. And so when you and this projector is kind of making interesting contours out of the slight shades of white, but As you come up, this is just emerging out of Blur, and you come up to the angel deck, and it's a little bit like an airplane coming out of a cloud, and it's just felt incredibly liberating to the blue sky above, and then you could just be swept by this cloud bank. And it kept moving around. In fact, we kept being shut down by the various restaurants because all the food was getting soggy everywhere, and it was very, very hard to control, particularly in high moments of humidity. We learned so much on this project. We really jumped out of an airplane without a parachute. We suggested that we could make a cloud, and we had no idea how to do it. We learned along the way, one of the very interesting lessons is that in order to make this atomized environment, you had to purify the water to a degree that was more pure than drinking water. And in fact, your lungs are incapable of dealing with any bacteria, unlike your digestive system. So we were, after we had done all of this and created it and kind of figured out the engineering, we were really nervous that if we didn't filter the water enough, we would basically kill an entire population. That's Legionnaire's disease. And anyway, it was very scary. And it's kind of, interesting that a lot of the work that we've done over the years is based on naivete. Like, if we weren't naive, we would have never touched it. And because we kind of, we somehow feel like we could do it, we'll figure it out, that it's allowed us to really do the research and the technical work to support the experiment. Anyway, so the project was blown up. This is from the water. It was after a year. I think it was open for 6 months for the expo. Then they wanted to keep it up to make a museum of something. I don't know. It was very strange, a science fiction museum or something like that. And we thought that there's nothing that ages more quickly than a World's Fair or an expo project, and it's pathetic, than the next year. So we really wanted to blow it up, and the white cloud became a black cloud with a couple of pieces of dynamite, and the steel was salvaged to build buildings in China. And I have to say that this is what was left was we were immortalized in chocolate, which is the highest honor that could ever be bestowed upon an architect working in Switzerland. But we were truly happy because this project really hit at every level. All different age levels, all different cultural levels, education levels, and to us, it was a kind of machine for making meanings. Everyone saw in Blur what they wanted to see or not see, and it reinforced the desire to really work in a larger public way. And so, as I mentioned, we continue to do individually generated projects, privately generated projects that sometimes see the light of day and sometimes don't. There was something that really hooked us in this ability to really communicate with a much broader audience. So out of the blue, and more or less like a year later, we were invited to do a retrospective of our work at the Whitney Museum of American Art. And this was, what had we done at that point? We had done a lot of installations and theater works, and we had done Blur, and we were working on our first museum. And the invitation to do a retrospective threw us into a kind of existential crisis. We just, how do you react to retrospectives are at the end of your life, at the end of your career. All of a sudden, a retrospective in the middle of your career was really weird, and at the same time, we felt that bringing the retrospective historically is the way a museum basically collects the work of an artist, all different kinds of work, and make sense out of it. And our work, because it was disposed in so many different places and it was very site-specific, really couldn't be collected in one place. It didn't have any meaning if it was collected in one place. But nevertheless, we couldn't leave the temptation of showing our stuff in a major New York museum. So we said, okay, we'll do it, but we'll do it on our terms. And we had curators. Michael Hayes and Aaron Betsky were curators, and we somehow subverted their friends. We subverted their curation in a way by how we took it. So these were some of the things that we had done before. Some of these urban installations, in some way or other, found their way into the show. Experiments in housekeeping, ironing shirts. We did a lot of kind of crazy things. This curated an exhibition on the American lawn, looked at conditions all over America of these edges and corporate lawns and domestic lawns and institutional lawns. All sorts of installations in museums, including this traveling installation called Tourism Suitcase Studies, which was fitted out in 50 Samsonite suitcases that became the exhibition cases for the show, and it was all about American tourism. And this piece, which was in the Cartier Foundation in Paris, and it was an exhibition of robots, little robots. Anyway, we had done a lot of these contemplations and physical artifacts, and they found their way into this show. And also, as well as theater pieces that were brought through media to the show. And so forth. It's just like a little sampling. Anyway, so for us, it was an odd time to look backwards, but we felt that the only way to deal with a retrospective was to make a kind of Uber show, so that tourism's master-slave, Bat Press, pageant, and all these other small installations and larger ones and objects and models and all of that would be housed there. Yet it would be under another kind of bigger installation, which was a reflection on the retrospective itself, and that's called mural. And that is this red dotted line is actually a path that I'll explain in a moment. That if you laid out the show, it was many hundreds of feet, and basically what we did was we put walls, white walls, in the very large gallery on the 4th floor at the Whitney, and these appear to be museum walls, but they were actually our walls, and they did a good job of separating and dividing up the space to these individual installations and produced an acoustic division and a visual division. And then there was this protagonist, this drill, which was just basically a hardware store drill, but it was put together with a really smart robot. These are the brains of the robot. And this robot basically cruised the space, across wall to wall, around the walls, and it perforated its way through the whole show, and it undermined the integrity of the white wall. So here it is going through the space where master-slave is, and watch it in action. So an intelligent navigator randomly selected a point in this three-dimensional matrix of coverage, kind of mapping of the whole space. And the drill moved to that point, it pierced the wall, it left a half-inch hole before it traveled to the next location. By the way, we worked with Honeybee Robotics that did the Mars driller, and we took some of their engineers off of their real work to do this. This was particularly hard rounding these walls. So initially, the holes were lone blemishes on these pristine white walls, and as the exhibition continued over 4 months, the walls became increasingly perforated, eventually holes on both sides aligned, both sides of the wall, and it opened views to between galleries, and clusters of holes randomly opened up sections of gallery surfaces. So this project was a kind of performance piece during which the wall was made increasingly unstable. This is the very wall that we critiqued in many of our previous projects when we entered the museum or the gallery. So rather than securing a neutral background, the wall actually competed for attention, and the content of this exhibition was basically a kind of pretext for the subtext, which was this this project that basically brought the white wall to light, the authority of that white wall, the acoustic separation, and it created this background drone which was incredibly infuriating. Anyway, so this is in one of the black spaces, and then we're very happy to actively decompose the curatorial text along the way. So it did it by itself, so we didn't have to think. The drill was just set into action, and then we simply came back every once in a while and looked at it. And so this is just looking a little bit close. This is alignment of 2 holes, so you're seeing right through this piercing into the next gallery. And this was very interesting. People left notes in the wall, in these holes, and it's kind of like very strange. It's a little bit like the Wailing Wall, you know, like people left wishes and things. And at one point, one of the guys from our studio found this little note on a receipt and said, "Please make the ICA turn out good." That was the first museum that we were doing, and it was a kind of beautiful moment, and we kept that note. So this was at that time, and we had in that exhibition we had the all sorts of materials around designing this first museum, and I have to say, for us, this was unthinkable, because we had spent our careers before critiquing the institution of the museum, and then all of a sudden, we were invited to speak in its voice. And it was another one of those very, very important turning points in the career of our studio, where people of my generation were starting to get into places of power, and it was at that point we said, well, what is it that we are critiquing? They invited us in, so let's make a good museum. And so starting from being basically guests to being hosts, we were, for the first time, not thinking about misbehaving. We were thinking about how to make, good gallery space and how to make it on budget, and all of that stuff. We think the ICA did turn out good. It was our first try at it. And it was about a 2-year design process, 2 years of construction. The site was on Boston Harbor, and this was the first new museum that Boston had built in 100 years. So it was momentous for Boston. And it was in Fan Pier, and it's basically an empty site. The ICA had traded in their site on Boylston Street, which is right very central, and they had an urban site on multiple levels. They really, more than anything, wanted a gallery on a single level. This site wasn't big enough, actually, for it. They got it for $1. So we did something that was very, very simple. won't describe too much, but we basically lifted the gallery, which is this whole thing. It's the size that they needed, and we took it over beyond our site. So this harbor front is all the way around Boston, 47 miles of pedestrian space. And we convinced the authorities to allow us to build over that space if we retracted our footprint below and made a space for the public to sit and also penetrate the museum in a different way. And this is throughout the museum, which we think of as a kind of instrument through which to understand the site and see the site, and sometimes the site is turned off and distributed in small doses. It's a site where you really want to look out, but a museum is so much about being inwardly focused that we felt that the site was a piece of the assets. It was one of the assets that the museum had, and it could be just kind of rolled out in different ways. So in the theater, it's there as a backdrop, and whiteout shades can come down and blackout shades as well. And then in the gallery, the view is entirely turned off, and this is a very short synopsis of this project, but I wanted to bring your attention to this little space, which is, and the museum is here. There's an 80-foot cantilever here. And this sheltered space is, for us, it's an important space to bring the general public in. And you don't have to pay a ticket to be part of the space, to have a meal or drink. And you could, and you're welcome into the museum as well. But we're very interested in that interface between the public and the institution. So this space that's cantilevered out of the cantilever is actually a space for media. It's the media tech, and basically it's another way of looking at the context. So simply by framing out the horizon and limiting the view, we're able to just look at the texture of the water, to be able to see the climactic conditions, the time of day, and so forth. When we opened this the building, and the first older person to come into the space said, "Wow, that's the biggest screensaver I've ever seen." And anyway, it was thematized as a screensaver. But it's a very contemplative space, and it's where, in a sense, technology and good old-fashioned techniques like making a frame are just as, in a sense, just as high-tech. Like, what is more high-tech? Using electronics or simply putting a frame on something and validating it and identifying something that's a little bit more important than the thing just to the right or to the left. So we definitely think that architecture is in and of itself is a high technology, because it involves so many issues of culture, of our culture, intersecting with issues of economy and politics and policy and so forth. So that to us is another man-made construct that is, for us, a high technology. Okay, so then moving on to, after the ICA, we were invited to do a bunch of different museums, and we're doing them slowly, one at a time. This is one that's in construction in Rio now. It's the Museum of Image and Sound. And it's basically in Rio de Janeiro. It's on Copacabana Beach. It's literally right on the beach, and it's a museum of the culture of Rio. It's film, it's music, photography, it's telenovelas, comedy, all of that stuff, and it includes the Carmen Miranda collection of headdresses and shoes. And it's like, what could anybody ever want? But exhibiting that stuff. And as I mentioned, it's right on the beach. In the public imagination, Rio is a place of scenic beauty and hedonistic pleasures, unaffected by socioeconomic realities of the everyday. But the city has long lost its glamour, and favelas ring Rio, producing this super juxtaposition of the haves and have-nots. And given Rio's diverse population and its difficulties in urbanization, we found that the beach is Rio's greatest democratic site. It unifies the city. It's a place of socializing around natural resources. It's a place of display and spectacle, from the scale of a single suntanned body to massive events that draw millions of people. And our building is conceived as an extension of the Burle Marx Boulevard, and it's stretched vertically to become the museum. So this is the pattern that Burle Marx made. It spans the entire beach, and we basically took this and we rolled the boulevard up the building, and this was a very important gesture for us. Architecture's role was to basically leverage the site and to create a very thick interface, weaving together the culture of the beach with a museum-going culture, to be able to blend these populations together. So you could come off the beach here, you could come take a shower, and you could walk. You could make your way up this set of stairs up to the top of the building and have a cup of coffee, watch a movie, or something like that. And this was one of the early sketches. This whole series of galleries, as you move up also on the inside, it follows that same route and creates a lot of half levels and interesting intersections between media. And this is that building, and it's right now in construction. And it's the world's longest construction, because Rio time is different than anybody else's time. They promised to do it before the Olympics, so we'll see. And this is at the top. And it really is a kind of exuberant expression of what could be, the mixing of these populations. Now, to come to another challenge city, Los Angeles, we are in the process of building right now the Broad, which is both a storage facility and a public exhibition space for Eli Broad's contemporary art collection. And Broad is one of the very big art collectors, contemporary art collectors in the country. And it's sited in downtown LA. And you could see right there, downtown. This is the Grand Avenue. You could just make out Disney Hall here. And the Grand Avenue is an important spine in LA. And there has been this master plan for a number of years to produce more density and a sense of a city in LA. And it's around that axis that this initiative is happening. But what actually does happen, and it's kind of inevitable that these very, very large institutions are just kind of growing along the spine of Grand Avenue. So these are powerful civic institutions. They're very important, but it actually lends itself to the criticism that the area is becoming overly gentrified, that it's an urban vacuum, and that attempts to that these kinds of attempts to urbanize downtown LA have produced kind of monuments instead of connective tissue, a kind of spatial apartheid also between a barely functioning business and cultural district and a mix of immigrant communities and a lot of homeless people. So many have doubted that downtown LA can ever be reconciled. And many thought that, that the ultimate silver bullet in LA's urbanization would be Disney Hall. And it was thought that the city could regenerate by this building single-handedly. And despite its success, and it's a really great hall, and I was really interested to see the Kaufman concert hall as well today. It was a really beautiful hall, and there are many similarities. This particular building didn't really succeed to catalyze a sense of urbanity downtown, and and that poses a problem for our building. Like, what do we do in this context? I think that we realized along the way, and our building is just to the left, just out here, and. We realized that no single building could do it, that you basically have to be optimistic, and that when you do the right thing, and you bring a culture there, and you bring a public, and good things will come out of it. And already we're starting to see some real activity. But anyway, back to the design. So next to Disney Hall, what the hell do you do? This is the most daunting problem, aside from fixing LA. And this is our envelope. We couldn't build very high. It's about half the height, and we had to fit into this envelope. And of course, the Broad program was bigger than the envelope, so all you could do is a box in the end. You couldn't really make something sculptural. But in any case, we really didn't want to even try to compete. It was impossible to compete. So we thought that we'd just make it different. So instead of making it shiny and smooth, we'd make it matte and porous, and just try to make as good a building as we could. Now, one of the dilemmas was that that display space outweighed the storage space by a certain percentage, and this was really a kind of tough nut. You go to the most important street, most important avenue in LA, and you put a storage facility on it. It's kind of crazy, but that's what kind of generated the diagram for the project. We call it the vault and the veil. And actually, over time, we were able to increase the amount of area for exhibitions. So in the end, we're able to have exhibitions down below in a certain portion under the vault, and in this whole area above the vault. So the vault is basically levitated it's off the street, and it contains the collection, uncurated or pre-curated. And the public is able to come off the street right through the vault and come to a very, very large gallery on top. Now, the veil is this kind of brittle structure. It's able to span the entire site, 1 acre, 40,000 square feet, without columns. And it's also the source of light. So it's a source of structure and a source of light. And between these two, that sort of constituted the whole piece, and then it was just a matter of figuring out how you exactly do that. We really like the idea of like having this like a suitcase that gets unpacked on the surface, and then it gets repacked and put back into the vault and unpacked again in different ways. So there's something really, really interesting about having the collection right there and being able to pierce through it. And so this is the diagram of the vault, and the vault is brooding, and it's solid, opaque, and the vault is all about bringing light and structure down. You could see the articulation is very organic here. This is the escalator that shoots you right through the vault under the skylight system. And there you go, like bam, and you get up to the top, And that's Eli. I think that gave us the commission, putting him right in the middle of that. He's a man with an ego. But the making of this vault is extremely complex and involved. First, we thought we can do it with just with concrete, stress concrete all the way, and make these very, very long spans. In the end, we ended up making it out of steel, clad in concrete, this is basically the diagram of circulation. You shoot your way through, and then you come down, and you actually see the pre-curated work on your way down. And so we're interested in, after seeing the exhibitions, to be able to understand that this is not a kind of general museum like the Nelson Atkins. It's a collection of one person, one sensibility, and it's really about that collection and that man. And the outside is that kind of brittle structure. You could see right through it. It brings filtered light in a very, very soft way. This little piece goes right into, it's kind of submerged into the, basically a lecture room that's also public. Here is the vault. And that's that moment of intersection. It's a very hard thing to build. And this is just, we do a lot of model making, and we do mock-ups in our studio. This is just from a 3D printer showing the curvature and the kind of complex geometry as we go from a wall to the ceiling. So the skylit ceiling and the perforated wall. And these are very difficult forms, very challenging to pull off. And so these are pieces that are actually starting to go into construction, and we're starting to get a sense of the large gallery and the building under construction. This is just a little interlude, and I just thought I'd throw it in. We continue to do installations at all different scales. I want to bring your attention to a misbehaving tree. We basically planted this this is in Liverpool. We planted this grove of trees, and some of them don't behave well. And they're planted into these planters that are on these trees are on a bias. So when the trees slowly move, they kind of sometimes kiss each other as they move through. Anyway, we continue to do some unusual things, and I just thought I'd throw a couple of in. Exits is a really important piece for us. It was a contemplation about human migration across the globe. And this was shown at the Fondation Cartier in Paris, and it was done in collaboration with Paul Virilio and a bunch of other architects and a statistician and a geographer and so forth. And it's based on the notion that home isn't what it used to be. Basically, the piece is an immersive animated panoramic projection involving 6 projectors, and it's focused on migration for political, economic, and environmental reasons. And our objective was to make palpable and even emotive the effect and the drama of uprooting people from their homes without resorting to conventional narrative media. So the palette was limited to animated graphics, and there was basically a narrative and a mapping system that would be rolled out by this big sphere, and the sphere is actually a projection as well, and all the data would be printed and erased by the same element. And I'm going to show it to you. So this was the setup. This is actually a still from the installation, and you could see that the continents, the land masses, are are basically configured backwards. So when this prints, it prints forward. It's like a printing press. So the video image orbits the room, the circular room, and it prints. I think it takes about 45 minutes to do the whole thing, and it takes 45 seconds to do one revolution. And so this is now rolling out the very first scene. And this shows, it basically, each of these pixels is 1,000 people. And it basically sets up the premise that for the first time, the global population crossed a significant threshold. 50% of the global population live in cities. Now, one thing I want to point out that these, what you're going to see is these land masses that are created just by the collection of pixels. All of this is data-driven. So once the kind of graphic style was set and the information was set, the configuration is simply a product. It's geocoded pixels that just find their spot. And it continues to move. So this, and these are just small snippets of the information that we showed. This is the decline of population in world cities, along with the elevation of population in cities. So I'm sorry, the decline in rural areas and the growth in cities. Again, these land masses are configured just with data. And then we moved on to other kinds of issues like, so these are populations that are moving for different reasons, economic reasons, political reasons. This is really about remittances, which is sending money home. And remittances comprise an informal economic network that plays a crucial role in the developing world. In 2007, this is where we started our data, 150 million migrants worldwide send money home in the form of remittances. These transactions were typically in small amounts of $100, $200, $300, and remittances added up to 300 billion, which is twice the amount of the total global foreign aid. So here, the country flags were geolocated over the country they represent, and the graphic erosion of the maps really had to do with the relative percentages of population decline and growth. Anyway, that's another chapter. Then we moved on to political refugees and forced migration. And again, this is all based on getting information from hundreds of different data sets. And we had to figure out which data sets we could depend on and which were not. And this was a pretty complicated matter. So while mobility is often a metaphor for freedom, it's sometimes a tragic necessity. The threats faced by people who are otherwise attached to their land but forced to move are depicted here, and the perils by those who, the ones who basically get caught up and are not allowed to move across boundaries. So they're simply blocked. And so this follows the movement of refugees and internally displaced people, IDPs, and it starts chronologically from 1991 and moves forward in time. 1 pixel equals 10 refugees. And so these are also asylum seekers and all of that. I won't get into all of this because it's complex. And this is another chapter, and this is all about natural disasters. We depicted the new equator. Basically, this is the line that divides global north from global south. It's a new socioeconomic and political division that exists between the wealthy and the developed countries and the undeveloped poor countries. And here we were just relating floods, basically of the same magnitude in global north and global south, and looking at the magnitude of displaced people, and basically follows that that an event of the same magnitude in the north displaces very few people, and the same magnitude in the south displaces a whole lot more. I mean, you could see it right there as an example. And then we moved on to rising seas and sinking cities, and this is basically a geo-reference depiction of global emissions of carbon dioxide, and we went into the thermal change over 50 years, and the rise of sea level, and coastal cities that will be affected in the next 50 years. But this is taking quite long, but it is an important project for us because we were able to, through another technique, through another mode that we had never used before, and using some really smart programmers and working with some data people, statisticians, geographers, really experts in all of these different fields. We were able to look at a world in a different way than we've seen it before. And we actually have shown this to policymakers, and they were able to see relationships for the first time interrelated that they hadn't seen before. And this is really a kind of the potential of data visualization in the future, that you could see things that you can't see with the naked eye. You can't see it even in still maps. But when you start to intersect conditions of politics and policy, environmental conditions, and social conditions, you start to see different kinds of patterns. Okay, I'm just going to stop it there. Okay, I want to also now move into another kind of work, and this is the work that we've done in New York over the last 10 years. I'm going to try to go through this quickly because I can see that we're not going to make it in time. Lincoln Center has been pretty much a 10-year project. Lincoln Center was planned in the 50s and constructed. Shovel in the ground, I think, was 59. And it was built out through the early 60s. And we were invited here to start on the project, very, very small project that eventually grew into a much bigger project. These were the guys that originally designed and built Lincoln Center. It was a kind of collection of celebrity architects. We came in and we kind of changed things around with a lot less testosterone than these guys. The great thing about Lincoln Center is that it did something for the first time. It put all these cultural institutions on one campus. And there were many people who thought that was a bad idea. It would basically create a kind of a ghetto for the arts. That would be better to distribute the arts through New York. But you know what they thought was a problem today we call synergy, and the new leadership of Lincoln Center is really putting all of these guys, all of these players together. So, but when they did this, they started off with a certain amount of organizations that grew to 12 in time. They made some of the worst urban planning calculations ever, and we had to come in and try to figure out how you fix that, and how you make it interesting and usable for a new sociopolitical context. Lincoln Center was designed for the automobile. In fact, it was for a suburban public that would come to New York from New Jersey or from Connecticut, would park their car below. So it sat on a plinth, and so you're looking at the plaza. Underneath is the garage and the central mechanical plant. In fact, and that population immediately got into their cars because this was not a very safe neighborhood, and they would and then go back home immediately. It was so car-centric that there was actually a gas station right underneath, like right near the fountain, and it was very strange. It was also, could have combusted any minute. When we came in, had all the code violations had been broken for 50 years. But this is the beautiful shot of Lincoln Center, and this is the way we like to remember Lincoln Center, an archival shot where everyone converges at intermission around the central fountain and along the promenade level of these three main houses. And it really is a beautiful moment in time, and it still works. And we came and we told the leadership that we wanted to make Lincoln Center more Lincoln Center than Lincoln Center. And what we meant by that was this. We wanted to make more of this because the rest of the campus kind of looked like this. And it was solid walls everywhere. This is a big plaza connection between North and South Campus. And it was the main entrance to the Juilliard Theater and also main entrance to Lincoln Center Theater, right through here. It was also the entrance to the garages. This was basically a service street. 65th Street was a service street, but it was also a kind of spine, inadvertently. Our work started here in the public spaces, and then it spread across to Tully Hall, and to Tully Lobbies, Tully Hall, Juilliard, then the whole frontage, then to the School of American Ballet, Bridge, and so forth. It was one of those things where it started, and then everybody else said, as long as you're doing that, as long as you're kicking up dust, why not fix our thing? And often there was no real program. It was just that we need to do something for the public. So it was kind of interesting working through this project. I'm just going to show you quickly a lot of before and afters. This is the Juilliard building. This was said to be one of the great brutalist buildings in the country. We were able to explain. This is the moment of expansion here, and it's a triangular site. We were able to extend Juilliard's top 3 teaching floors by about 55,000 square feet. This is also an expansion of Juilliard, and here is an expansion of Tully Hall. Tully Hall was always underground, and it was there was really no lobby to speak of. We put it on display, we expanded the lobby, we made it very public, and this was super important to us. And you could see some of the details. We kind of brought the windows across, made blind windows. We added an extra floor. We made these kind of strange prismatic windows. And the other side, while one side was an expansion of the travertine facade, the other side was a kind of sheer cut on Broadway where you could see all of the stuff happening in Juilliard, and almost like a section cut through the building. I was telling this story to Joy earlier today that the students and the faculty at Juilliard felt very much like they were in a monastery. They wanted light, they wanted a connection to the city. These are all these great overachiever kids that somehow were just going up and down these endless double-loaded corridors, and it was really not a very good space. So we brought a lot of light and air to it, and exposure. And here's the dance studio. That's kind of a theme in our work. We always have one of these things. But Robin Williams characterized it perfectly. He said Juilliard, he was an alumni, he said Juilliard is like prison with cellos. And we wanted to really kind of change that up, and there were many things that we did. This is Tully Hall, just in front. Wanted to open up. There's a super transparent glazing system, one-way cable net with the outside kind of space just kind of spilling out. So it was a public space that's just simply divided by a glass wall, and with activities inside. This is the transformation of Tully Hall. This was our first concert hall, and we had to keep the bones of the space. We had to keep the stage where it was, and we had to keep the supporting structure where it was, even those boxes. But we were able to change the acoustics of the space and the feel of the space entirely. This is a whole. I do a lecture for 2 hours on this point. And the lecture is called Pointless, and it was trying to actually configure a geometric moment in this whole space, which is a property of the acoustics and the materials and the boxes, and trying to achieve something with resin and blushing. The space blushes. So anyway, this is just a very, very short overview. The Juilliard School. This was the entrance above. This is that plaza that was lifted above the ground that created a 200-foot long shadow. There's really no. It's one of the great conservatories in the country with no front door. So we gave them a front door. And everything in Lincoln Center was calculated to complete the monumental project that it was, but to humanize it at the same time. So big steps, but the steps are like furniture and made of wood. And the very same kind of attitude here. This is the frontage. This is Avery Fisher Hall, and the Met is just behind. The New York State Theater is to the left. This is the main entrance to the main interface with the city that Lincoln Center has. And you have a very small sidewalk. You have this little small group of steps. And after you've crossed 13 lanes of traffic, gone across here, up the steps, you're mowed down by 2 more lanes of traffic. And then you have to go between these Jersey barriers that happen after 9/11. And we thought that Lincoln Center really deserved better than this. And so we did a very, very simple thing that ended up being not so cheap, but important. This, they could not deal with that is, the leadership could not deal without having some kind of drop-off very, very close to the houses. And by the way, when Philip Johnson did the original master plan, he had the cars coming up on the plaza and leaving the passengers like right in front of the front doors, right on the plaza. It was very, very suburban. But anyway, this road had to go, and what we did was we basically depressed it to the concourse level. So any black cars that want to get under there, they come in and they go under the stair. The stair becomes a thin bridge over, and now it's expanded across that road, and the road is, the sidewalk is deepened. For us, it was very, very important, again, to make a big gesture, a monumental gesture, to complete what Lincoln Center should have been in the first place, but then do it on our own terms. These very, very long cantilever glass canopies are over the ADA ramps, which basically bring public into the arcades. And the steps are made of LEDs, so they're constantly recycling information about what's going on. And we really intended this to be both monumental, but also a people place, a place where the public would gather, where there was basically an electronic welcome mat to the site. It's quite active. We changed the fountain. This was the most precious, untouchable thing at Lincoln Center. Everyone said, well, okay, you can do stuff there, but not here. We ended up doing something very, very simple. We this is a dam of water. We basically brought the water level down to a plaza level, and we floated a ring. It's about the same diameter, but we just simply uplit it, made it out of the same granite, black granite, floated it on six supports, brought the water level down, and changed up the whole fountain system and made it intelligent, and kind of produced all sorts of programming for the water. And this is just Fashion Week. The first time Fashion Week was at Lincoln Center. We invited them as a kind of the extra constituent, also made out of travertine. This is, though, out of fabric. Anyway, won't get into that. Okay, more before and after. This is the North Plaza. So this was designed by Dan Kiley, and I understand that Dan Kiley also had to do with the garden here around the Nelson Atkins. We actually had to change it because the trees had not been in good health, and we put all of the trees basically in a big mosque that makes an outdoor space here, and then we reconfigured the reflecting pool a little bit with a Henry Moore sculpture, and we made a green roof over a destination restaurant and also screening rooms for the Film Society. And this is the green roof. And we thought of it as a kind of urban bucolic, a place that faces onto the reflecting pool and onto the plaza. And it has a certain kind of topography. The underside of that is the restaurant. And so it's a hyperbolic paraboloid, and the kitchen is on display. And this space is also used by the public for different kinds of gatherings. For us, Lincoln Center, it was all about breaking down those opaque walls of the very fortressed Lincoln Center that was conceived in a time where culture was thought to be elitist. It was a very, very defensive place. And we wanted to interleave populations of artists, audiences, stagehands, office workers, students, neighbors, tourists, foodies, and so forth. And we wanted to look at how to take on a historic inheritance, do preservation, but do it in a very creative way. So not exactly preservation, but a kind of interpretation of this, and it was all historically sensitive. So for us, Lincoln Center has been a kind of melding of these distinct pieces of expertise, like urban design, architecture, landscape architecture, interiors, and information design, and all blended together into one place. We had to do it all. And this is another before and after. This is the 65th Street, that spine again from the other side, now filled with information technologies. We kind of made all the video content there. These are people from the street that become breakdancers that come into the screens, kind of wild, and a very small pedestrian bridge that takes the place of the 200-foot bridge. This is a diagram of us in the middle of all the constituents, the constituents, the city authorities, all the stakeholders here, and all the projects, and we survived this project. I could hardly believe it. This made us, well, first of all, it tested my patience. I never thought I had it, and millions of meetings involved to make anything. Lincoln Center has this governance that of the 12 constituent organizations, they have to have unanimity on any decision in public space. So one dissenting vote would mean that everything would be stopped. So getting consensus, getting the philanthropy, making it all work, getting everybody to agree. George Balanchine said once that the only thing that the constituents have in common at Lincoln Center is the central mechanical plant. And he was really right. I mean, they didn't act as a campus, but it took so much effort to actually make them work together. So what's good for one box office is good for another. And that was a big lesson, I think, to everybody. And now it seems to be very successful. Okay, I want to just introduce the High Line. This is also has been nearly a 10-year project, and we're 2/3 done with it. And the advantage of doing a linear project is you can basically do it like sausage. You collect enough money to go up to 20th Street and then 25th Street, 30th Street, and so forth. So the High Line was basically a piece of obsolete urban infrastructure that is on the west side of Manhattan. This is the site. This is basically Gansevoort Street in the meatpacking district, and it goes all the way up to the Hudson rail yards and comes around the rail yard and sinks down. And this area was used to distribute basically food products and light industrial stuff to warehouses and light industrial factories around this area. Actually, it went down another 5 blocks, and that was ultimately demolished earlier. And just a touch of history, around the 1850s or so, there was a train that basically was built on the surface of Manhattan. It was really crazy because you see it intersected traffic and the public. And as the city grew, the traffic grew, and so did collisions between the train and pedestrians and cars. And they ultimately basically hired a cowboy to clear the space so that the public, it would save lives, basically, as trains came in. Around the Depression era, they decided to take this train and elevate it, and around 30 feet up in the air, away from traffic. And basically, this system was in place for about 50 years until about 1980, and the highway system took over delivery of these goods, and the High Line basically went into a ruin. And it was basically inaccessible. It was, this is illegal. What he's doing is illegal. And that was one of the beautiful things about it. It felt illicit to be up there. Actually, there was no way to be there unless you climbed over from an adjoining building across a fire escape and you jumped. So it was private property. And it looked, it was pretty much a nasty ruin. And what the public saw from the street is basically this 1.5 mile long piece of infrastructure went between buildings, through buildings, and then went across the street. This part would be exposed all the way up and down from Gansevoort up to the 30s. And there was just no way of understanding what the potential of this space could be. It just looked like an eyesore. And in fact, the property owners around this area petitioned Giuliani to demolish it. And they did demolish the 5 blocks. In the meantime, a group of citizen activists, actually 2 guys, quit their day job and decided that, wow, wouldn't High Line be a great public park? And they commissioned Joel Sternfeld as photographer to photograph it in different seasons. And these photos were published. And it was the first time that the public was able to see what was on there, and it ignited a kind of public imagination in a way that allowed these guys, it was really like the political power of photography, that allowed them to show these kind of overgrown ruins to various policymakers and political people and wealthy people, to contribute to see if this could actually become a public park. When we won the competition to do this, we already had an idea for a project. I'll show you in a second. It's very, very simple. This is a project that shows the greatest restraint, that it doesn't need a whole lot of architecture, but it needs a kind of close reading of the site. So what was so incredible about this place was that it's self-seeded. So all that you saw there, those weeds, basically, that New Yorkers think of as botany and horticulture. Basically, there were seeds that were just blown off of freight cars, or they were just basically, so some of them were not native species, but also native species got blown there. And what happened was that there were all these different sites, and some of them were windblown, some of them were surrounded by towers, and they were kind of dark and wet, and some of them were flooded with sunlight. And so there were all these kind of micro environments that happened there as a result of this kind of perverse urban condition that was changing all the way for a mile and a half. So you got like 100 different species that took seed there, and it looked really varied and interesting, all these different grasses. So anyway, when we started to work on it, we were very, very interested in this opportunistic landscape. And problem was that the ballast was kind of toxic. We had to take everything out, take all the plants out and all the everything out of there, and we had to remediate the bathtub and some of the steel work and all of that to make it good for the next decades. And when we did that, we had to figure out, well, okay, how do we, we could seed it back, we could bring back those species, but how do we bring the public up there without ruining? And this was a big problem. It's very often it's very narrow there, maybe 24 feet in areas, even 22 feet. How do you avoid doing this? A path and vegetation, which is the kind of the obvious thing to do. So we got our stimulation, and by the way, I have to mention James Corner and Pete Udolph, our collaborators on this. We were very stimulated by the way that this kind of natural decay cycles happen in nature overcoming culture, overcoming nature, overcoming culture, and could we reproduce something like this? So we came up with this new paving system that was made of concrete pavers. They were very long and skinny, had tapered ends, which could comb into vegetation in different ways. We could assemble these pavers in different degrees to produce 100% hardscape to 100% vegetation, and any gradient in between. And we were also, I have to say, we were very interested in preserving the kind of melancholia of the site. We didn't think that it was necessarily possible, but there was something very, very beautiful about this post-industrial site that had seen all this kind of change, this change of New York. And how do you preserve that? How do you make up a place from which to see New York, where New York becomes on display? These are some of the planks. There are many different types. And you could see here that the language is very, very simple. Here are the planks, the way it kind of filters into vegetation, some of the tracks brought back, the language of the concrete pavers becomes the benches, the existing guardrails become the source of light. And it's a very light touch. Sometimes we use the tracks in a post-industrial way to create lounge chairs here that are movable. And this is the entrance. There's a slow entrance. We thought of our entrances in speeds rather than types, so there are slower ones and faster ones. Here you could see the kind of blunt cut of where 5 blocks were removed. I should just say that in when the Friends of the High Line, these two young guys, argued to keep the High Line, transform it into a park, they argued on the fact that it could be a catalyst for development, much like the way that Central Park was a catalyst for development of above 59th Street, and the last act of Mayor Giuliani's administration was actually signing the court order to demolish the High Line, and I would really love to talk to him now to see how he feels, because he really thought it was worthless. But But fortunately, the Bloomberg administration came and they turned the court order around and allowed the team to reconceive the space. Now, New York is not very progressive when it comes to parks, and we had to argue for a park 30 feet in the air where you had to rethink everything like garbage removal and security and snow removal and all of that stuff, which no one could really compute. How do you do that? And so this particular administration couldn't have happened without it. It was a great administration. These are some of the kind of atmospheres on the High Line, and you could see here, it gets really skinny. There were many buildings built along the way. There's by some famous architects. And some of the best shots we found were from the internet. We found that. And one of the great things about the High Line is that you're in this unofficial place. It's really an alternative park. It's in the air. You're by the side of these party walls that were never meant to be seen, and you really have a glimpse of a kind of unofficial New York. And so here are just a couple of shots of the atmospheres. So a lot of these spaces, we don't know. I mean, they're all, everything has valued up, so we don't know how long this is going to last. But we love these sea of cars and billboards, and we're able to just through lighting really change the atmospheres of some of these spaces that the High Line just rams right through. This is Chelsea Market is on to the other side. Actually, the Department of Homeland Security is around here. We learned the hard way. And you could see this is just like all sorts of strange things that happen and kind of uncontrollable juxtapositions. This is the thing that is so kind of great about the High Line is that it's what you didn't do that makes it really good. We just did some things. So here is one of the things that we didn't do. This is a building off of 20th, just around 20th Street. The High Line is just below to the right, and by accident, a construction light was aimed at this window, just by accident. It turned out that the person that lives in there is a cabaret singer, that every night she would come out during the construction, and she mic'd the whole place, and she has, and she sang to an audience that would, come around, and it's called the Renegade Cabaret. And so she performed for the public. These kinds of things are happening all the time, and it's what you least expect that becomes so interesting. This building is one of the very few structures that managed to get there before the zoning changes over 14th Street. This is the Standard Hotel by Polshek. And they were able to bridge. They own both sides of the site, and they were able to bridge with a building, and you can't do that now. It's a glass building, and you have a captive audience, and that people started to perform for. And it's just kind of really super strange that it kind of became consensual, and people would come and watch, and people would perform, and anyway, we couldn't have predicted it, and everything's the High Line. This name cannot be protected, so there are High Lines everywhere. Everything is capitalizing on it. It's a place where fashion is photographed. There's a scene from Sex and the City. Actually, there are these High Line bags. You could see the High Line logo on it. A High Line dress. We made this for a competition for Miss Meatpacking District, and so there's a lot of hype around the site, and we engage it every so often. This is entirely made of bacon and salami, and there's nothing mechanical. It was all grease that's holding this together, Anyway, but the High Line has become really, really popular, and you can tell that, like something interesting has happened when you're part of an establishing shot for Family Guy. I guess this is Marvel Comics. And it's just everywhere. The High Line has gotten into everything. And it's super interesting for us. And then there's this perfume that's advertised. I don't have it here, but it's advertised something as like the first High Line perfume, and it has the scent of urban renewal. And that's how it's advertised. It really. Anyway, I kind of, you have to just say that, as an architect, you can just take a project part of the way, and then, if it's interesting, it gets taken in different places, different ways. And so the High Line, and it's pretty interesting, this thing it's what we love and also what we hate in New York. All of a sudden, the High Line was this real gem, and it was forgotten, and it was rediscovered, and then it became valued. So this notion of catalyzing the site became, just exceeded anyone's expectations. The city invested $150 million in the High Line, which included all the remediation, and it's already made more than, there are $2 billion of investments in and around the High Line. So amazing growth, a little too fast for our taste. These are some of the buildings that are coming up around the High Line. This was maybe a year ago. There are many more today, and the High Line has gone viral. So this is something called the High Line effect. I understand these High Lines are proliferating all over the world, and here are just a few. We're just collecting these, and actually we're very pleased because what's happened is there was the Promenade Plantée preceded the High Line in Paris, but it was kind of unnoticed even by Parisians. Something about the High Line really captured the public imagination, became extremely popular. It has to do with where it is, really. It's like the perfect density for the kind of sense of decay and rebirth on that site is so palpable. But every city is trying to kind of produce a High Line effect of their own using infrastructure, and that's a very, very good thing. This is. I just show this one detail. This is a moment where the High Line crosses diagonally, and it goes from being mid-block across 10th Avenue and back to mid-block. And this is one of the spurs. And what we did here was we just cut out the steel underneath, and we replaced the steel with glass, like that. And we made a kind of one of our signature moves, kind of a place to sit, a little a viewing area, a viewing platform, and this, after thinking about it a lot, why is this so successful in New York? I think it's really successful because it has taught New Yorkers something that they really don't know, and that is how to do nothing. And it really, you can't really throw balls, you can't bring your bike up there, you can't do rollerblades, you can't do anything but sit and walk. And this is a place where people can sit and just watch taillights of cars going up 10th Avenue. And people come there and they sit there and they watch it, and it's kind of like the new lava lamp. It's, I don't know, and there's something that really kind of is in sync, with people that are constantly doing something productive. To be in a place where doing something unproductive is sanctioned is very important, because if you're not at work, you're burning calories in the gym or you're walking your dogs. But just to go and promenade in a place like this is a very old-fashioned kind of newness to New Yorkers. So this little goes all the way down, and I'll just say a couple more words about this. Urban parks are typically an escape from the city. You go to the High Line actually to re-enter the city, but it's unconscious. It's the imperfect, the overlooked, the blank party walls, the innards of buildings, the loading docks, chop shops at arm's distance from cars parked up on mechanical lifts, next to fireplaces and smokestacks floating at the height of giant underwear ads. And so even as the condos go up next to the High Line will always refuse to fit neatly into the logics of the city. This accidental ecosystem that we initially found has spawned a new ecosystem in which natives, tourists, artists, executives, socialites, club kids, cruisers, retirees, sunbathers, fitness buffs, fashionistas, and even flashers produce a new biodiversity that's distinctly New York. And maybe, just maybe, the High Line is a product. And it's the kind of love that New Yorkers have for it is a product of this kind of strange moment of the in-between, which is a combination of nostalgia for an irretrievable past and a skepticism and a concern for a homogenized monocultural future. And there's also a suspicion that the High Line will fall victim to its own success and ultimately consume itself. But for now, for a short time, vacancy and gentrification are in a balance, and 2/3 of the High Line is complete. I wanted to, I know I'm over time, but I just had to show this one final project, and this will take 5 minutes. The last portion of the High Line goes around here, and we're currently working on it. It's being designed and partially remediated and being built as we speak. This is the Hudson Rail Yards. This is an active rail yards for Penn Station and Amtrak. And there will be a big deck over this site, and there's going to be a huge development on it, like 13 million square feet. Right around here, there was a site that the city asked in an RFP for a call for ideas about what one could do culturally in 21,000 square feet. And so we, with David Rockwell, our first collaborator on that very first project at the World Trade Center 9/11 site, we collaborated to propose the Culture Shed. And it sits right there, and it's on this western edge of the High Line, around 300 linear feet across its length. The site has changed. We could only build up about 100 feet, and it's only a 21,000 square foot footprint. What does New York not have? It has so much culture where it doesn't have a venue that's truly multidisciplinary, where visual arts and performing arts can be in one place, that's purpose-built for that. It does not have a really truly transformable space that's scalable. It doesn't have an unbranded space like a Kunsthal where work could come in. Right now there's so many shows that go right past New York and don't stop because the institutions are so heavy, and it takes so long to get into an exhibition cycle, and one could never get in. It doesn't really have a self-sustainable place. We thought about this after actually 2008, and realized that in the financial crisis, where philanthropy is drying up and there's no money from the government, why shouldn't a new cultural institution be financially self-sustainable? How would it do that? And unbranded twice. Twice as unbranded. So how does it do this? So it does this very, very simply. It's a base building and a deployable shed that doubles its footprint. And by doubling its footprint, we can have super large shows, but we don't have to have it deployed all the time. We don't have to heat and air condition it. We only put it out when we need to. And one of the needs could be for income-producing events. How does it really work? It works with industrial technology, gantry crane technology. So this is basically 3 levels of galleries, about 13,000 square feet each, column-free, rooftop bar, and this deployable shed. And it docks into a 75-story building, which we are also doing, also along with our collaborator, David. And the building basically, the shed docks into that building. Here's the base building. These guillotine doors all can come up, and you have basically a 31,000 square foot footprint on the ground floor. Very tall space that could take all sorts of different very large installations, as well as theatrical productions, as well as gala events, as well as Fashion Week. And there it is. And this is just another view. So what we did was in self-defense, because we didn't want another architect that was going to be mean to us, to be right next to us and do something that's destructive. We took on this commission as our first really big commercial project, but our developer project, but we were able to do something with this building. It's like this rectangle with a girdle that turns into a clover leaf. Our core, our mechanical space, and our offices are in the lower portions of this building. So we're able to actually make it dependent. These two buildings are kind of interdependent, and we're able to get more space. So the shed, another view. This is the High Line as it goes north and across to the west and around the rail yards, and you could see this 300 linear feet of access. And the train theme is very much prevalent between the High Line, the shed, which operates on rails, and the active rail yard below. And this is the interior of the shed. We're designing this very, very closely with a bunch of engineers, steel structure with a mechanical system right on it and into it. ETFE pillows constitute the walls. And here you have a little bit of that structure, the ETFE. The span that it takes to cross this site becomes the technical ceiling of the building. And we could rig it, in any number of ways. So we have this very, very large space that's infinitely flexible, that has strong points everywhere, where basically it's in a way it's super low tech, and the infrastructure could be ripped out at any moment and updated. But it's got something that's very, very precious in New York, which is it's space. It's really just about preserving space and making more of it, and making it adjustable. So there's just some plans and sections. I'm just gonna and just get to the programming. So this is what it's about. It's exhibitions, performances, public events that are both produced, co-produced, and presented in relationship to income-generating events like galas, fashion events, creative industry events. And so creative industry is very, very important, and we don't see a real high-low between visual arts, performing arts, and creative industry. We kind of embrace it, and we unashamedly say that we can find a really good alliance with creative industry to be able to produce income-generating events. And that's the art fairs, auctions, concerts, film festivals, and such. So we brought this idea to the city. The city really embraced it and helped us a little bit in a formative time where the idea was being tested. We were modeling it in terms of a business plan. And eventually the city, the creative industry, the city totally embraced it. And now we're just about to start construction documents. We've raised half of the money already. We're an independent, non-for-profit organization, and we've changed the zoning around the site. And we've been able to really, produce this very new And it's one in which we're imagining kind of global timeshare with other cultural institutions, a way to also produce opportunities for New York institutions that just simply don't have enough space or can't afford their space. So this is just, 50% of the time it will look like this, nested. Some of the time we can have very large-scale shows. In the summer, we could totally open it up and have free, open to the public concerts and film screenings. We could also deploy this for private functions. And, in many museums, you basically clear out the lobby or you clear out a large exhibition space to have a income-generating function. Here, you just press the button. It takes 15 minutes to deploy. This is Fashion Week, which happens twice a year. And there are all different variations here. And we modeled with the city some potential calendars that could make sense. And we're in the process of working with a committee of artists and museum directors, festival directors, and cultural entrepreneurs of all types to actually produce and invent this institution as we're constructing the building. And this is one of those rare opportunities where the building is preceding the institution, or it's invented the institution. And so, what I wanted to close by saying is that rather than just designing a new cultural institution, and in this case, we really wanted to do something alternative that wasn't top-heavy, that it grows out of the needs of artists and the decreasing supply of funding. This new initiative produces a kind of new paradigm of cultural entrepreneurship that really kind of makes sense at the beginning of the 21st century. And already, as we've shown this project, other cities are saying, well, why don't we have one of those? Because it totally makes sense. And especially in America, where there are very, very few places that are really unbranded. This will eventually be a brand in itself, but it's not a Guggenheim, it's not a MoMA, it doesn't come with a heavy legacy. Bloomberg, the Bloomberg administration will be out, but the city just recently announced a $50 million gift to the project, and we're well on our way fundraising. And the Culture Shed will open its doors in end of 2017, beginning of 2018. Thank you. I think as it's so late, I won't take any questions, but I see everyone's stomachs are churning and ready for dinner, so thanks all.